All right, you see all the lovely palettes laid out. Today we're going to start going into our Scarlet Lakes, our PR188, and we're going to continue leading into our PR177s, which also in the near future will lead us into Alizarin Crimson some more. So let's get started and see how these compare. All right, let's start off with Scarlet Scarlet Lake. And all three of these will be PR188. Really nice and vibrant. Scarlet definitely has a certain look to all of their paints. Really pretty. Let's make sure we got our mass tone nice and dark. Lovely. And right next to it, we're going to do our Roman Schmal, which is Scarlet Lake as well. It's nice to see these honey-based paints right next to each other. Beautiful, beautiful. And next up we have a Scarlet Red by Roman Schmal, also PR188. And I actually didn't have a ton of PR188s. So that's why we're also going to be looking at PR177 today. Tiny bit too much water. It's funny how lots of companies use the name Scarlet in different pigments and so forth. So that's why we're going to be doing 177, because it's going to glide us into Alizarin Crimson and Scarlet and Naphthol, which a lot of companies also use Scarlet on some of those other pigments. So we'll see how those compare in our next video. Ooh, that one's so beautiful, nice, dark, and rich. And let's take a look at our PR177s. First up, we have Daniel Smith with Anthraquinone Red. And I know I butchered that pronunciation. Now, a lot of people use, well, only a few use 177 as a pigment in their permanent alizarin crimson, or call it anthraquinone or alizarin claret or something to that effect. These come in many different names, and that will lead us into a new name and a new line of pigments. I'm trying to keep this kind of consecutive as we go through them so that you can kind of see, and we can flip back and compare the names to the different pigments. Really, really beautiful red. And now we have Michael Harding with Alizarin Claret, also the PR177. Those two are actually quite close in their look. Beautiful. Core is our next one. It's nice to see how they paint out too and kind of react to the water. I always try and do a little bit of a pushback so we can see if they cauliflower extreme or anything like that. This one does seem a little bit darker or heavier. Could be user error slightly. Gotta love these names. Burgundy Wine by Old Holland. And this one tends to feel a little bit softer than the two right before it. Pretty color. It does look slightly different than the other ones though. So keeping with Old Holland, they have a mixture of Alizarin Crimson, or they call it Alizarin Crimson, of PR177, PV19, and PBR23. Let's see how different this one is. Lots of makers use a lot of different combinations for Alizarin Crimson, and we'll be doing a whole video on adding all the ones that we don't swatch here and comparing them. It can get so confusing out there with pigment to names. We kind of talked about that in the last video. And I like putting in the combination ones, like the mixtures like this, because that does tend to happen in a lot of brands. You kind of wonder if they're good representation of that name, or these are all drying out quite differently. They look quite different. Some are much cooler, some are much more of a truer red. That was a much more truer red. And our last beauty of today is A Gallo, and it is a combo color of PR177, PR144, and PV19. So similar to the mixture that was right before. This one feels a little lighter on its feet than the one right before. And when I say lighter on its feet, I mean like the pigment actually feels lighter to paint with than the Old Holland. The Old Holland tend to have a very certain feel to them. They're kind of a very heavy feel. Some people consider them a little sticky. Very pigmented though. But I find them a little more difficult to paint with than something like an A Gallo or Daniel Smith or Core or Michael Hardin. The Old Holland is a little more temperamental, I guess. They make them in the very old-fashioned ways on how they used to make them quite some time ago. So that is our PR177. So let's back up, take a look at. So we did a few more of our Scarlets up here, and we're heading into our PR177s, which is, some of them call them Alizarin Crimson, or a variants of Alizarin Claret or something to that effect. And we're going to be continuing then in our next video into more Alizarin Crimsons. And we're also going to go into more Scarlets, or also called Naphthol Red, which is PR170. And we'll see what we come up with as we trail this down the crazy business of name to pigment number. So let's let those dry, and we'll be back in a second to take a look. All right, I did a little tape peel. A Gallo still has one tiny little spot that's still a tiny bit damp. You can really see the difference between the warm and the cooler color on this page as we veer into our cooler reds. Let's take a closer look at our PR188s. See if I can get this to focus. Now, compared to, let's take a look at our other warm reds, which are on this page. Let me just zoom out a tiny bit. From our last couple of videos, our vermilion, our PR255, which leads us into Scarlets, and then we have many more Scarlets down here, which tend to lead more towards our truer reds. And then compared to what we did today, we have our few extra warm reds, our PR188s, and then we'll also take a look at our Scarlet Naphthols in the next video, and that will be our PR170s, which will still lean on the warm side, compared to leaning into our cool tones, which is our PR177s. And we'll be taking a look at more alizarin crimsons and many more cooler tones. There's actually a lot more cooler reds than there are the warmer reds. Or at least I have a selection. I guess I tend to like my cooler reds more. The PR177s, I'd say Daniel Smith is one of the pinkest on this page, and Michael Harding is, I'd say, the deepest in color. The Old Holland mixture of Alizarin Crimson tends to lean, has a touch more brown, as well as the A Gallo has a tiny bit more of a brown feel to it. And also, I wanted to show you, let's go ahead and flip back. There was one, what do you think of the Conceal by Schmincke? If you take a look at that one, which I have a video up of this as well, The conceal, I think, actually looks a lot like the PR177s. What do you think? Does it look similar to you? Let's flip one more time. That's NR4-1. And compared to these, I'd say it's pretty close, especially to the Michael Harding. It's almost visually, to me, very, very close. So that's something to keep in mind. If you already have that color, you might not need any of these. Well, I hope you like this comparison today of going from our warms to our cooler reds. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.